Alrighty. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, The Conscious Man. We've got Aunt Brenda, Brenda Sue. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
I've been excited about this one. We can talk all about consciousness.
Yes.
So, first question I always ask, I guess, because the name of the show is The Conscious Man. So, what is a conscious man to you?
Conscious man is one who doesn't live on automatic. One who
Oh, I like that.
chooses actions and how to live. One who responds rather than reacts. One who's aware that they're aware.
Pull this a little bit closer if you're going to sit back like that.
Okay. I can come forward.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so a man who doesn't live on automatic. That might be one of the best answers I've got so far on the show. I really like that. A man who doesn't live on automatic. And it's like, it's interesting because I look back at my own life and how much of my life I was living on automatic. And you see it so much in men these days that so many men just live on automatic. And I actually saw a podcast the other day where the guy was talking about whether or not we have free will, which has always been such an interesting conversation to me. It's like, do we have free will, or is everything God, and so there's really only one being that has free will? And essentially what he said was we are slowly moving into free will, right? So we're born with these programs, right? We're basically born as like this set of things that have happened to us that make us into, I don't want to say like a computer program, but like in a sense, right? Yeah, like a story, right? And I feel like there comes a point in your life when you kind of like realize that you are this set of programming, and there's a lot of that programming that goes against what you really want in your life.
Yeah. We sabotage.
Yeah, why do we sabotage ourselves?
To keep our story. It benefits us somewhere, I think.
It benefits us somewhere, or it used to benefit us?
Right. Habit, too.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I see it is like it did benefit us in some sense when we were younger, in a way that we thought it was keeping us alive, or at least it was at one point in our life, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you're a little kid, you depend on certain things. You depend on, for example, like the attention from your parents, like the validation, like you actually need them to pay attention to you in order for you to survive.
Right.
And yeah, it's such an interesting topic because we carry that with us. It seems like almost to the point where we like have this like waking up point in our lives, right? And for me, that was like at 30 years old. I got to this point where I had done these things that I thought I was supposed to do to be happy. And I quickly found out that I was doing things to make other people happy. Mm-hmm. I was doing things for other people's validation, for other people's attention. And I thought that was what would make me happy, because going back to my childhood, what I ultimately was doing was searching for someone to give me attention so that I could survive.
Right.
And it took me a while to wake up to that. I still think I was fairly young, but I'd like to hear your awakening because you woke up pretty early, right?
I think I had opportunities too, but I didn't really go for it till about 40.
Really?
Mm-hmm. My first experience with consciousness or waking up was actually when I was 8.
Okay.
And the day of my confirmation at church after baptism. And I remember them telling me that I got the gift of the Holy Ghost.
Okay.
And I got confirmed, and I realized I've had this the whole time.
When you were 8 years old, you realized that?
Yes. I've known between right and wrong my whole life.
Yeah, sure.
And so I think that's when I started seeking for some truth. I started seeking when I got my period in teenage years, because I couldn't understand why I would be so emotional. And then sometimes then after a period, I would say that wasn't me. You know, that was
Really?
my period. I was, so I was having these little signs,
like little zoom outs where you could kind of tell.
Yes. Yeah. And I knew at 15, I knew my hormones had kicked in. I knew I had a voice, but I knew what I couldn't say to adults, to the rules at school, to get what I wanted.
Okay.
And then, I'm 16, couldn't wait to be 16 to drive, because I thought that was going to bring me happiness.
Sure.
More happiness. Then I couldn't wait to move out of the house. Yeah. And I couldn't wait to get married. So there's all these signs, and I'm trying, and I accomplish something, and then it's something that doesn't last. Yeah. So then, instead of seeking for experience and happiness, I started seeking for truth. So.
And that started happening about 40 years old.
It was when I was starting to go through similar experiences in my second marriage that I went through in my first marriage. And I'm like, I'm the common denominator. Yeah. So let's look at yourself. Okay. And I started doing more spiritual things, but that ended up being just as psychological as the material world. Yeah. Like, you do this, you'll get this. Yeah. And it still, it still went away. Yeah. It still went away. And probably it hit me in an instant when I learned it, but it took a long time of questioning. I've always questioned life and that. And so when I realized that I wasn't my emotions, and I wasn't my failures, and I wasn't my beliefs,
and your achievements,
and all of it, and I wasn't my body, all of it. And I realized there was a deeper part of me that has been with me my entire life. The true reality of being consciousness, awareness, so many different words for that, knowing. It saved me. It brought me relief. It brought me huge relief. I was hospitalized my senior year for depression for a week. And I was on Prozac for 25 years. Mm-hmm. I was in counseling for 20 years off and on. And I worked out every day because that was the only place I felt good. Yeah. And just because I couldn't find myself. And I think it has been a search that I was even unaware of connecting with myself. Okay. My own source.
Yeah. Okay, so when you say, when you do this, you get this, right? That's ultimately what I think you're saying, because we had this conversation and I didn't understand really what you were talking about. We had this conversation just last weekend, but when you say, when you do this, you get this, what would be the opposite of that?
Opposite of, example, if you...
The way I look at it is, you do this, then you're going to feel some sort of fulfillment. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you feel better.
Yeah.
You feel better. You work to get money so you can spend. You work out to get rid of emotions or to be a certain weight. Yeah. And then you get that you get it, and you actually feel happy for
a moment.
For a moment, and maybe even longer sometimes. But it just doesn't last. And so that is an indirect way to feel. So if you're happy, you're happy. We all know happiness. Yeah. If you felt happiness, it's in you.
Sure.
And so I found that my invisible expectations, even to myself or to a partner, was it was blocking it. Yeah. It was blocking. I would put up the gate over my heart, and then I wouldn't feel the love that I am. But when any of us, we buy a truck, you know, we get to go shopping, dirt biking, you know, you feel this, you collapse into your soul.
Yeah.
And that's actually what happiness is. You're feeling it because the wanting for it isn't there anymore. The desire was blocking that whole feeling, the wholeness feeling.
Yeah.
And so once that want...
Is it blocking it, though, or is it leading it to you? Because I understand that both. It is kind of the opposite of it in a sense, right? But also, and I don't know if everyone has to go through this process, but for me, it was like I had to search for happiness outside of myself before I realized that it wouldn't fulfill me.
Right.
You know, and so it's like part of this path where it's like, and it's a beautiful part of the path to search for validation and happiness outside of you, right? Because ultimately, it only leads back to one place.
Right.
You know, when you get to that place where you think it's going to fulfill you and then, you know, it's short lasting, then there's only one place to go from there, right? Which is back to you, back to
everything begins and ends.
Everything.
Yeah, it begins and ends with you.
Yeah.
You know, there's this goal, there's this action to reach it, and then you get it, and it all begins and ends with you.
Yeah.
So why not just stay there first?
Interesting.
You know, and that's how you can attract, you know, stuff to you, is by already being it.
Already being it, yeah.
Already being satisfied, already being the fulfillment of that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense because I've been thinking about that since we had that conversation. I didn't quite understand because on one level I agree, and I know that is truth, but I also see the path to get there requires the opposite, right? Like it does, like on some level you have to go through that process. And it's just like, how much of that do you actually have to do before you wake up to the fact that you don't have to make that loop back to yourself? Right. You can just stay there.
Right.
Right? Okay.
But it's like we took on all these beliefs and never looked into them.
Yeah.
You know, about a lot of things. Is happiness in objects? What is the objects? What is the subject? You know, all of that stuff and expectations.
Yeah, and it took me a long time, and I'm honestly just like barely scratching the surface of like beginning to understand that I am everything, you know, and I think you spend a lifetime of going through this process of searching for things outside of yourself, because while I know it, I will continue to search for happiness outside of myself unconsciously in certain ways until, you know, I lead myself back to myself. So, yeah, it's really good. So I wanted to have you tell a little bit about who you are to me. You tell a little bit about your story with Bart and how that whole process has gone.
So about myself?
Yeah, and just kind of like, obviously, you're my aunt, for those that don't know. You married my uncle. And Bart, and he's been on the previous podcast before, so if you want to go back and listen to his story, he has a wild story. But you were a huge part of it, and actually one of my earliest memories was your guys' wedding, you know, because me and Bart, since I was very little, we always had a very special relationship. You know, he would always make me laugh. I always looked up to him. But one of my earliest memories was your guys' wedding. What year was that?
1994.
Okay, so I was 3 years old.
Right.
Yeah, so I was very little, but I do remember like holding your dress. You had that big long dress. Yeah, so then you guys got married in 1994, and then?
Yes, well, I moved to California my senior year, which was pretty devastating to me. I have a lot of attachment to home and to my friends, and it was really, it was hard for me to move to California. And that's when I went through depression my senior year and was hospitalized.
Okay. Why did you move to California when you were a senior? You moved with your parents?
Mm-hmm. My dad had been living down there, coming home on weekends for 5 years.
Okay.
And all of us were teenagers. My mom had 4 of us in 5 years, and we were all being teenagers. And so she needed the support. I didn't understand it then. I do now. But so we moved down there, and I actually I had a friend that told me Bart was moving down there, and it was right near me. And so I had to look him up, see who he even was. I didn't know who he was in high school because we went to high school together at Davis High.
Yeah, okay.
And had similar friends. And
so you kind of knew who he was.
And then when I looked him up, I knew who he was. But I was really excited. I saw him at a volleyball game, and I went over and hugged him like I knew him because he was a piece of home.
Yeah, sure.
I was super excited.
Yeah.
And so we dated for 5 years before we got married.
What was he doing in California at the time? Was he living with us?
Yes.
Okay.
He and his friend Jesse went down there, and they were going to move out together, and then Jesse went home, and so he stayed with you.
Okay.
And so he was just working, getting out of the house.
Yeah.
And having experiences on his own. And so we dated off and on, broke up a lot of summers, and always were drawn back together. And we got married in 1994. And I did hair, and he was working for the water department.
Okay.
And then became a fireman.
Sure.
We had fun. I mean, Bart, if anybody who knows Bart, they've had a fun experience with him.
He's definitely fun.
So we always had fun and played and didn't even talk about having a family, until we were about almost 30.
Okay.
And then I wanted a baby. And so, and he really didn't want a baby. And he told me.
How old were you when you got married in 94?
23.
Okay.
So 7 years.
You've been married for almost 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And ready to move,
Yeah, sure. Progress.
Yeah. I mean, and he said he didn't want a baby. And I'm like, I don't remember that conversation.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, if you really don't want one, then will you go get a vasectomy? So I know it's real because I mean, it's a real deal.
Yeah.
For me, I wanted a family. And so.
Did you always want kids?
No. Not when I was in. My friend and I used to tease about.
So you guys never talked about it when you first got
married? I guess
married?
we didn't, and no one really guides you in what to talk about when you are getting married or dating.
Yeah.
And that's why I love talking to my kids about all that now. But
yeah.
So I guess why else would you get married unless you were going to have a family one day?
Yeah, sure. Makes sense to me.
So I told him I was going off the pill. And if he didn't want kids, then it was up to him.
Okay.
To take care of.
And he's not the most careful person, we know.
He kept that. I mean, but he did good. But there was a couple times, it could have happened. And
sure.
I didn't have a period very often. I actually had to go on birth control when I was anorexia, hospitalized for depression. I had lost so much weight that I didn't have a period anymore.
Okay.
So I had to go back on the pill to.
So did you even know if you could have kids?
No. Actually, that was the moment when he said, if you keep this up, you're not going to be able to have kids.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when I turned around.
Okay. Yeah.
So then I knew there was a possibility. Yeah. And I didn't have periods. I hadn't even had a period in 4 months. So it's not like I could go off of that.
Right.
And I went in and I was pregnant. 5 weeks pregnant.
How long after you went off did you get pregnant? If you remember.
A year.
Okay.
We did good.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't I've heard that he felt tricked, but we did have a very conscious talk about that. Sure. I was going to go off the pill, and
I'll believe you on that one.
So anyway, when he found out I was pregnant, I don't think we talked for a few weeks. Very, very upset.
He just take off, or was he still around? He
was taking off anyway. You know what I mean? There was a lot of times he went to play pool, and we had a business. We owned a salon at
this
time.
point. You were back in Utah. Mm-hmm. You had your big salon in Utah with how many?
14 stylists.
Okay, yeah, it was a big place. I remember going there to get my hair cut as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were running it, and it was going good, and I thought we were moving forward.
Yeah.
And so we didn't talk for a while, and he came around. but he was scared. And he didn't tell me till,
He thought the party was over.
Yeah. He was scared to go to bed at 9:00. He was scared to be serious and not be able to go on vacations. And it scared him. It scared him to be in charge of a human.
Yeah.
And so, but we ended up having Sierra, and she changed my world. That is where I found my strength in becoming a mom. And becoming a mom is where, she was everything. I mean, even when I was pregnant with her, I felt her with me, and it changed me. And so we had her.
How did that go, having her in the hospital with Bart? Was he
Good.
there? He was there?
No, yeah, he was there. I mean,
he was excited. He just...
Yeah, and your mom was there. She was our nurse, and he did good. He stayed with me. I mean, held her. I mean, he loved her. I mean, I thought I was picking the best father because of the uncle he is.
Right.
I mean, he's everybody's...
he loved us. Yeah, we always had tons of fun with him.
Fun. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't even understand. So, within 6 months, we separated. But, I mean, I went back to work within a week. He was not going to let his life change, so he went on as many vacations as he could to prove it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hold him back, Sure. I just...
He had his boat. He was partying on his boat every weekend. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, anyway, I ended up writing him a letter and saying what I needed. It was like a 9-page letter in every aspect, financially, emotionally, physically, mentally. How I needed him.
Yeah.
And he was already on a downward cycle. We had messed with drugs, and drinking and all that. And he was spiraling and making sure that I wasn't going to change his life.
Right.
And so I left him, and he spiraled down.
Yeah.
He spiraled down. So
drugs, meth, everything that comes with it.
Everything.
When did he start doing meth? Do you know? On a regular basis, at least.
Probably 2 years before. It was when he had his landscaping business.
Right. Okay.
And
2 years before Sierra was born.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 or 3 years before.
Okay.
And I did it with him sometimes, and and liked it.
Yeah.
And so but I was okay growing up from that. I was even okay if afterwards, I would pump milk, and if I wanted a drink, then I would get the pump milk and use that,
Yeah.
So we separated, and within 6 months, and that was the hardest thing. Your mom can tell you, like, Bart was my life. I loved him more than I loved myself.
Yeah.
He was the love of my
life.
life.
Felt like he was your soulmate.
Yeah. And I had a very, 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 very hard time. I'd call Bernice crying, and she'd let me know that you're going further between these cries, so you're growing. And I had to look at it that way. And I guess the day I realized I was over him, I thought I was, was he backed out into my neighbor's car, his Trans Am. And he's like, I don't have any insurance. I'm like, what does Sarah see in him? Like, who doesn't have insurance? And I'm like, what did I see? And so I think that was my stepping forward of moving past it. And it would have been a lot harder if he wasn't going downhill.
Sure.
It would have been a lot harder to leave.
Yeah.
If I knew I needed to.
Yeah, sure.
And then when Sierra was almost 3, I remarried. And I felt emotionally safe.
About 2.5 years later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 2.5 years later. So it was about 2 years after that.
Yeah.
That I dated a little bit, and I felt emotionally safe with my second husband.
Okay.
And
he's like the opposite of Bart in a lot of ways.
Personality-wise.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of similar things.
Yeah.
Meaning he had a history of drugs and lying, and so I felt like I was repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, why
as we do.
Why is this happening again to me?
Yeah.
So And I at times really, really, really wanted to leave. But my experience was, okay, I can go and get this with another person in almost every area, but then I wouldn't have the family. I'm like, so I'd still feel like I was missing something.
Right.
So I stayed. And
Was it hard with you and JD at the very beginning?
To be married?
Yeah, to stay married before you had kids?
Well, I got pregnant about 5 weeks after, because I didn't know how it was going to go, because Sierra, I didn't have periods, and so I didn't know. So I was 30 and 31. And
didn't want to ruin your chance to have a family.
Yeah, and so we just decided to try, and so I got pregnant pretty fast, and
with Garrett.
With Garrett.
Yeah.
Yep. And so then Gage came. Yeah, we struggled. I was seeing the same things, but he was always sorry. So I mean, just then they
wasn't quite as much of a spiral as you'd seen from Bart,
no,
so it was
no,
comfortable enough to stay, but it wasn't your dream life.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it was enough.
Yeah.
It was enough, and my kids, I was loving being a mom, and so it was enough. And so then,
Garrett is
20.
2 years?
3 years.
3 years younger than Sierra.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
3 years younger than Sierra. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how long did that marriage last then?
JD and I?
Yeah.
18 years.
Long time.
A long time, but
and you had 2 more beautiful kids.
3 more kids.
Yeah, after Garrett, I mean.
Yeah.
So you had Sierra with Bart, and then you had Garrett, Gage, and Sydney.
Yes.
And Gage is 17?
Mm-hmm.
Sydney's 14?
15.
15 now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you had your family.
I had my family.
Yeah.
And I will forever be grateful to JD for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm also grateful for the journey I got with him, too. I never felt like he was going to leave me, because he always felt like I was going to leave him.
Yeah.
And so
you had a little bit of that power there to be safe.
Yeah, I felt safe for sure.
Yeah.
And so I used him as my emotional trainer. I started working on myself, looking for happiness. We ended up going to the temple. We went to the extremes. I mean, I almost have to go to extremes to then find my balance.
Yeah, sure.
And so,
which is kind of how it works for a lot of people. Yeah, you swing that pendulum, and then it comes back into center. Yeah,
and that's where the
were you and
magic
Bart
is.
Still in the church when you guys were married?
No, we were never in the church.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I went a couple times, and I hadn't made a decision like I've left the church.
Sure.
But we weren't doing what you're supposed to.
But when you were with JD, you decided to give it a shot, see if it would make you happy.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
And so we went to that extreme, and then I started, and then he got, I don't need to tell his information, but he went away to a rehab.
Yeah.
And I was going to leave. And I did, and then once again, I came to the conclusion that I wouldn't have my family, and that would kill me. So I just started diving into how to feel better for myself. Yeah. And I started going to yoga, and I do foot zoning. I was doing all these modalities, and I'd feel great, for a little bit, and learn more about myself. And so then, but then I used him as my emotional trainer. Sure. I did, and I actually ended up writing a book about all the tools that I used during that time because I knew it wasn't his job to make me happy. I mean, it was nice when he did. Yeah. And I mean, and there's a lot of good in our marriage too. It wasn't awful. We didn't fight.
Much more stable than what you had known before, at least, right?
Yeah, we weren't fighting, but we weren't communicating. There's those ends of it. And so, so anyway, I used it to my benefit, and then I started, the counseling and all that, and just working on myself. And so when I found out he was seeing somebody else, the very day I felt very like, I'm prepared for this.
Yeah, and this was after 18 years of marriage.
It was after 18 years. I know who I am.
Yeah.
I know who I am as Brenda here, and I know that I'm awareness, and I try to align that. I try to align that all the time, but you're still going to feel.
Yeah, sure. You have to zoom in and zoom out.
Yeah.
There's both sides of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was very, very hard for me. It hit so many emotions that were the same, and the doubt in myself and just questioning everything. But
what was your biggest fear?
Of
leaving
JD? When I wanted to earlier, or at the day I did, when I did?
Yeah, I guess what kept you there for 18 years?
The family.
Just so it was a fear of breaking up your family and
not seeing them as much.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they were my life.
Yeah, sure.
And I just thought, well, I've had to learn how to deal with him. I want to teach my kids how you deal. It's not people. You need to be okay with how people are. They can show up however they want, and it's your reaction to it. So.
Yeah, it's so interesting because so many parents try and protect their kids from anything bad that could possibly happen to them, and I think that's noble, but I think our view of love, especially when it comes to children, is a little bit inverted. That we came to this life to grow, not to just be protected from everything that comes our way.
Right.
And you see it so often with parents that just protect their kids from everything, and it ends up debilitating them in a sense that they don't really know how to go out and take care of themselves. And I think it's like I said, I think it's noble that you really don't want to pass down trauma to your kids, and you do want to protect them in a sense, but true love means letting the person that you love go through the process that they need to go through, and even sometimes possibly being the villain in their stories, which really is going to be every parent at some point in their child's life, especially if their child goes through a healing process. The parent has to be okay to kind of be that villain in certain points, and that to me is actually what true love is letting them go through the process that God wants them to go through.
Right.
And not always protecting them, and realizing that they are going to get hurt, even from some of the things that that you as their parent do. So okay.
Trust the process.
So yeah, trust the process for sure. So anyways, continue with your story. So 18 years of marriage, you decide it's time.
I decided it was time. Yep. I knew it that day. I knew I was going to be okay, because you're always okay in that unchanging space.
Sure.
And I knew I was going to be okay, but I still felt everything. And we were writing it up within 2 weeks. I mean, there was no fight for it.
Yeah. He was ready too.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was very ready to. We did not communicate, though. I was blindsided, and I know, looking back, I shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But there was no communication about, except for 5 weeks before the day it happened,
He's an avoider.
Yep.
Okay.
So.
Got it.
Yeah. And doesn't like confrontation.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Typical of a lot of men in today's world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of men that do not like confrontation, and I think it's just a symptom of a society of weak men, because confrontation is healthy, right? Fully facing your shit, especially when you screw up.
You're just burying everything if you don't talk about it.
Yeah, and you're just extending your pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I told Sierra, she said she wasn't surprised, because JD had called Bart earlier in the summer, and JD had made a comment.
And JD and Bart were kind of friends in a sense.
Yeah,
right?
we had, not from my perspective, but they really were. I didn't know they were.
Yeah.
I liked that JD was nice to, and I always
Well, JD looked up to Bart in
Yes.
a lot of ways, and I know he used to call him for advice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
And he always used to comment that he never got the Brenda that he did.
Oh, yeah.
And I go, well, I love myself now.
Yeah.
So, but JD and I were out on a date, and he had made the comment that Bart said, "Don't make my mistake." And I didn't even know what that was about. I thought it was about the motorcycle accident, and so anyway, Sierra told me that JD had called Bart and told him that he didn't want to be married. before he even told me. And so Sierra was not surprised by all this. So about 9 days after that JD left, I called Bart and I wanted to know more about that conversation.
Yeah.
And so I said, I think you're the only one that can help me. And he just goes, it's not you, it's him. It wasn't you with me. It's not you with him.
Yeah.
It's his stuff. You know, did it make me feel better? I don't know. But we talked for a little while, and then just going through the process of a divorce, feeling everything. I actually kept a journal of the whole 6 months from this point. And I was in the process of writing my book of tools, which was tools to help you have clarity, not to be more positive, but just to have more clarity and have space and be open.
Was this conversation the one where he accidentally called you, or that came after?
That came after.
Okay.
So anyway, 2 months later, I think you asked him, he had just broken up with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And you had asked him how I was and how the divorce was coming. And he's like, I don't even know when that was. And he looked when it was, and it was a couple months earlier, and he accidentally called me. I wasn't right there, and so like when I came back to my phone, I saw 2 missed calls from Bart.
Okay.
And so I actually called him and said, is Sierra okay? Yeah. I thought it was Sierra. I just thought, why is he calling me?
Sure.
So anyway, he goes, no, do you want to hear the story? Yeah, Chase asked, and so I called you.
We were sitting there talking about you, and then he goes, oh, shit.
Yeah. So we ended up talking for like 45 minutes. Yeah. And when I knew I was getting a divorce, I mean, I was right away going, I'm not going to date anybody with kids. I want to be able to talk to them like my friend Lawrence. And so I just knew certain things. I didn't want to live with somebody. I didn't want to get married again. Yeah. I mean, I just, like right off the bat, I knew what
you wanted.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
What I wanted. And so, but I didn't realize that put Bart at the top of my list. I didn't know I was manifesting that really, you know? So we talked, and he was talking about all his lessons he learned in prison. And, you know, I mean, I was really seeing his change. Yeah. Talking about the illusion of the world. I mean, I felt like I'm like, I cannot believe this. He hits two of the things on my list. Not that I really had a list, but I did have a list.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I have his kids, so he doesn't have any other kids, and I can talk to him.
Yeah.
Like the way I want to. Mm-hmm. And so I go, what in the world just happened here? It just shocked me. Mm-hmm. And then Sierra started bringing me, like when the kids would go with JD, she would take me down to your house with her on those weekends.
She was going down to hang out with her dad. And,
And it was good. I always enjoyed seeing Bart. He always gave me a kiss on the forehead. Yeah. I loved hugging him. I always wanted to make JD feel comfortable, though. Yeah. You know, I didn't want to be with Bart. Right. But I wanted JD to feel comfortable. But Bart has always been nice about me and to me. And so anyway, we started hanging out. And I mean, I have this all written down. I was confused. Like, I'm not going to. Why are you thinking this? And that's even what made me go, you're not your thoughts either. This is going to be this way. Yeah. We hadn't really worked through healing what happened, you know, and he was just excited just to hang out with me and be my friend. And, you know, I don't think he thought we would. He
still just wanted to have a good time.
Yeah, of course.
He dropped the drugs at this point, but he still just wanted to have a good time.
Yep, he had been clean for, I think, 4 years with one setback, and that's my favorite story. Yeah. Is when he realized he's powerless with it. So, you know, I was excited to hang out with him, and we talked, and probably within 2 weeks, for me, I knew I was going there.
You were in trouble.
Yeah, but I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to one person but myself about it, because I knew
you were scared what people were going to say.
Yeah, I knew I went beyond people's. I knew what people would say. I knew what they believed. Yeah. And I just had to go past that, and so we reunited. And
was that 2 years ago?
It'll be 3 in December.
3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
it was really cool being part of that process and just seeing how excited he got when you know, because I remember when he first called you, and because I had sensed it actually before that. I knew as soon as you were getting a divorce that this probably was coming, you know, because I could feel your guys' connection. Mm-hmm. And so I remember, when he accidentally called you, and I kind of like, well, what do you think? And he was like, she would never take me back, and he wouldn't let himself go there. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was cool to be part of that whole process and watch him like get excited and like realize for the first time that, maybe it could happen. Mm-hmm. Maybe he could redeem himself after all these years. And yeah, so it was really beautiful. And you guys now have this relationship that, when you guys are together, people can just see it, and it's really rare. And I know that because I have it too with Shauna. Mm-hmm. It's something that's so beautiful, and you see it in people's eyes when they see you together. They see it. People can see that you have this deep soulmate connection that is just like nothing else that you can experience in this life. Right. And so, yeah, I sure am glad you guys made your way back to each other.
Me too. I mean, I didn't even realize what I had shut away in myself. And it felt weird to trust and to be vulnerable and all that again with him. Yeah. And I'm like, I might not have ever felt that again in my life. I just had shut it.
You settled.
Yeah, and I alive. I'm home.
Yeah. I'm home. Definitely, you can see that when you guys are together, and it's the same for him as well. So with that all done now, do you believe in destiny? What are your thoughts on that?
Destiny?
Fate.
Yeah, I do. I believe almost in everything. Yeah. But yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm actually a pretty big believer in destiny. I'm a pretty big believer that we don't really have the control that we think we do. And going back to what you always talk about, consciousness, right? You zoom out enough, and consciousness is one, right? And so I'm a big believer that one consciousness is in control of everything. And we come down here, and we believe that we are our programming, our thoughts,
it's set up.
Behavior.
We already have our personality.
Right, but if you really zoom out and you go back to origin or source, everything had to have all been planned by that one infinite consciousness. Right. So in that sense, we really don't have control. Right. That consciousness is the only thing that is actually in control of anything. And in that sense, I believe, because I believe that consciousness is infinitely powerful and also exists outside of time. Yep. Therefore, everything has already been planned out and everything has already happened.
It's already known.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you can toy with the idea that infinite possibilities exist, and I do believe that on some level, but I believe that the timeline that I'm existing in currently has already been planned out and has already happened, and that's what I've experienced in my own life, is that I really don't have the control that I think that I do, or I don't have the control that my ego thinks that it does, which is not really me. Right. So ultimately, I am in full control. Right. Yep. Yeah. So you've taught me a lot. I'm super grateful to have you back in my life. I'm so glad that my uncle, who's been, my best friend since I was a little tiny kid, has you back in his life. And I've really cherished the relationships that I've started to build with your kids. Me and Sierra have always been close, and I've always just loved her to death. Garrett is just amazing, one of the sweetest, kindest kids I've ever met. Gage is one of my favorite humans ever. Fucking love Gage. He's worked in my yard for a couple years now, and he's just such a sweet kid. And Sydney, same thing. She seems to me like a mini version of you, and just very sweet and very open, and yeah. So super grateful for you. Appreciate you coming on the show and telling a little bit about your story. Before we end, is there anything that you wanted to add or anything you wanted to say?
Oh, I guess like my journey right now is I'm in the process of writing a 4-part self-help series.
Yes.
And so
tell us a little bit about that.
So the first book is called Labels, and it is I have it.
Yeah, pull it out.
So it's a way for people to see. So you go through, and you're not your appearances and why. You're not your thoughts and why. Emotions, body. This is what all of us
So
have.
it's all the layers of
all the
going
layers.
down until you get to consciousness.
Yeah, so until you get to who you really are, which is awareness, consciousness, knowing, God, all of it. So that was my first book. And usually when my clients read this book, they'll go, oh, they totally relate to one.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but that's true for all of them.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's where I think people can, if you want to get more conscious, find the consciousness in everything. Like, I have thoughts that I'm seeing, you know, or thinking.
Yeah. You can observe every single one of those layers.
Yes.
Right? So you must exist outside of that if you can observe it.
Right. Right. I mean, if it's known to you, it can't be you.
Right.
So, like, all of it, our thoughts, our bodies, everything. So this is my first book, and then the second, so this is realizing who you are. So the thought was realizing who you are, and then I did a tool book, this one, which is just a bunch of different tools, like explaining how to have clarity, you know, and have everybody see that emotions like anxiety and calmness are on the same measuring stick. You know, they actually bend and they don't exist without each other. The polarities here.
Yeah, because we exist in a universe of duality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're here. So like tools to work through that. And then the next book is called Tan, which is a neutral color, which you know is one of my favorite words. Being neutral, finding the magic in the middle.
Yeah.
And it also is an acronym for turn around now and stand from awareness first and then mind and then matter.
Interesting.
And so, and then just understanding God's part in it, this character that we are in.
Yeah.
Understanding that, and then understanding consciousness. So it's just so you understand who you are. And then the last book is called Minecraft, and that is undoing stuff. It's a workbook.
Is that one done?
No, they are
You're
both. They're
on
written out, but I'm writing them. And my goal is to be done by the time I'm 55. 2 years.
Okay.
So
yeah,
it's a 4-part series. I don't even know if they have series in self-help, but I want to do something with it. I would love to help. The whole world seems to be divided and mental and just needs help with some tools. And so I would love to help people take care of themselves first, and then it was just a relief for me to know who I was.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, it's not even just who you are, because it's who God is, right? You're really getting to know God, because you know, I kind of see this shift in consciousness that's happening right now, where we've been sold all these religions that there's always something between you and God that needs to be your intermediary, right? And I kind of call it like this old God paradigm, you know? And when I talk about it, it's like the shift that's happening right now is we are taking back God, because we are Him.
Yes.
Right? We are consciousness. We are infinite intelligence. We are source. And so we are taking Him back. We do not need anyone between us and God.
Right.
Right? And so this work that you're doing, I love it, because it's a huge part of this shift that's happening. It's this work that you're helping people understand that you are not separate from God.
Right.
That He exists within you, and He is you.
Right.
And from that perspective, you can heal so much suffering in your own life.
Right.
You know, but it's so hard for people to get to that place. And here you have tools to get there. Yeah. You know, to get people to that understanding that not only are they God, but they are whole within themselves, and they can find happiness within.
They already are that.
They already are happiness.
They just need to discover that within themselves.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's beautiful.
It's a journey.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
And I've loved mine, and I loved, you know, being asleep as well, because it was a beautiful part of the process.
Know any better.
Yeah. And, you know, and I even say that like I'm awake now, and I've just only barely scratched the surface of understanding, you know, and that's the beautiful part of this whole process, is that it's never ending. We are on a never ending journey to understand God and understand ourselves and understand that they are one.
And it's beautiful.
And it's beautiful, every part of it.
Equanimity, you know, in everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love your message, especially about just the you know, when we talk, it's that word, you say neutral, and it always makes me think center, you know, which also makes me think about God.
Right.
You know, because that is what he is. He is neutral. He is center. He is everything. He is all. Yes. And he is whole. Yeah. Right?
Yes.
So, awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Brenda.
Thank you.
That was amazing. And are you on Instagram? People can find you on Instagram. Not really.
Not really.
Okay, well, if you guys want a copy of her book, just reach out to me, and I'll put you in contact, because the books are absolutely fucking amazing, especially if you're in a dark place, you know, because you have been there, and so you understand, and these are your teachings that helped you get out of there.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time. Peace.